It's time for People in Profile on KCLR 96 FM, the heart of Carlow Kilkenny.
Hello, good evening, and you're very welcome to another edition of People in Profile, the weekly programme on KCLR 96 FM, which invites people into our studios here to talk about themselves, their lives and work, and to play their musical favourites. My name is Martin Bridgeman, and I'll be your host again this evening. My guest tonight is a musician born and bred in Kilkenny, but apart from a minor distraction he might describe of going to first year in UCD, he has been pretty much involved in the music business since the mid-80s. Most famously as the lead singer of the Kilkenny band Engine Alley, but actually here he's been doing another few things as well since then. Canice Kenealy, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
You're from Kilkenny originally.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, from the middle of the town, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much city centre, from New Street.
Right.
And I was born in Kilkenny. I went to school in Patrick's, Delasall. That was our parish as well, Patrick's.
Yeah.
And went to secondary school in Kieran's College.
Right,
Left as soon as I could.
We'll come back to that one. Yeah, as you say, you're living in the city. You were walking to school. I mean, walking to at your Kieran's will be across the road from where you go. That's up right, as well. Yeah. Do you have a memory of first day at school or any strong memories?
Yeah, I do remember my first day at school. Yeah. I remember people who were there. Some people were upset to be there, and some people were wondering what they were doing there. Yeah, I do remember the first day, and I remember a lot of things from that time. And I remember my sister walking me to school. We used to walk across New Street. There's all traffic lights there now, but in those days there was no traffic lights, and I suppose there was less cars then as well,
Mm.
But I remember New Street didn't have any. There was no. It's very wide now, It used to be a very narrow street.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of trees there, and it's changed a lot, Kilkenny has changed a lot, really. When I came back to Kilkenny a few years ago, you just think of all the places that are so different now. I did enjoy school, yeah. I mean, I did make a lot of friends. I was good at that, I suppose. I was thinking back about it recently that a lot of the time I used to spend forming bands. These little bands. Even though we couldn't even play instruments yet, we used to get people together, and we'd have a name, and we'd write some songs, write some poems,
Yeah. What age would you be now? Is that in
I remember doing that when I was 9 or 10. 9, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we used to have a reel-to-reel tape recorder at home, and we'd have a microphone hooked up to it, and I'd do all sorts of. I used to do these little shows, these sort of imaginary pieces. I used to do them with my sister as well. We used to pretend to be different characters and just make up these kind of movies, really, and just have this reel-to-reel tape rolling. And
do you have
it?
it still?
Do I have the machine still?
Yeah. Well, no. Do you have the tape still?
No, I see. You used to go over the tapes.
Oh, did you? Oh, right.
It's 3 weeks later.
Right.
Tapes were so expensive.
So there's no archives out there, no.
No, not really. No,
Yeah.
There's not much spoken word, really.
Yeah.
Well, there are some tapes that my father made in the early 70s and the late 60s of all my family, of us singing songs when we were 2 or 3.
Right.
Which are priceless. And actually, there was a final birthday party that I had in January 1980 when I was 9, and things got out of control, and that's captured on tape where everybody is just screaming and there's a lot of crying and people insisting on standing up on top of tables singing police songs and that kind of thing.
Okay.
But that developed into music then as well, getting people together for music. But it was a while before I learned how to play an instrument.
Mm.
And it was something that I was always putting off for years.
Was it kind of like a gang thing? The way growing up you might have gangs that you'd organise into, for cowboys and Indians, or as you were doing theatre and music and poetry and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Was that kind of as you say, your musical layer didn't come in until later, but you were
I was already organising people, I think. Yeah, I was already. Yeah, it was definitely a gang thing. Oh yeah.
Mm.
You'd be hanging out. You'd be in a gang. There was sort of a culture. There was a culture there to support being into gangs as well. It was in movies and everything, and it was just a natural development to start singing. and I picked up the guitar when I was 15, and like properly, bought a guitar and learned how to play it properly. And I was helped. My brother Brian helped me to learn the guitar, and at the same time as I was learning the guitar, my best friend Eamon Byrne was learning how to play the guitar. So we got a thing together. And for some reason we didn't really play in any bands around Kilkenny. I don't know, maybe we just couldn't find compatible musicians, or I don't know what it was, but we just had this thing going between the two of us, and we used to busk outside downstairs on Kieran Street. And
yeah. Still a famous busking place. There were some great buskers there over the Christmas.
There's a bit of sound there,
yeah.
And we do all our little cover versions, and that kind of, the reason I mention that is because Kenealy kind of developed out of that friendship, and it also developed out of the songwriting thing that I struck up with my brother Brian.
Right. And was this something that got positively encouraged, or was it just something that you did outside school? I mean, did you do anything musical in school? Is that, I suppose, is what
No,
I
didn't. No, yeah. There was I didn't do music or anything. Myself and Brian were the only two members of our family who weren't formally given, piano lessons, and we're the only two who would have been creative with music. Afterwards,
Right.
But we didn't do it in school, and it wasn't really encouraged either. It was kind of tolerated, really, I mean, my parents knew that I was interested in it, and but we didn't need that much encouragement either. We just went for it, I mean, they did help us financially to get a guitar and stuff, but I mean, in the school there was in Kieran's College there was a talent competition, and there was a priest there who would encourage us to play. But I don't remember using the facilities, really. We just did it ourselves at home, really. It was really a bedroom kind of thing.
Yeah.
Writing the songs.
If I'm picking you up right, you had two songwriting partners. You had your brother and you had Eamon.
Yeah, not really. No, it was. I didn't really write songs with Eamon. It was pretty much. It was just Brian was the songwriting partner.
Right.
But the thing with Brian, I often describe it as I say to people that I met Brian in UCD, that I only met him, and people think, what do you mean you met him? He's your brother, But he was 7 years older than me,
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Still is.
So I mean that, well, last you checked.
Yeah.
But I mean, in childhood terms, I mean, you would have been going into secondary school, and presumably he would have been on into college.
Yeah, he was gone. Yeah,
he was
gone
from
even
the house
before I finished primary school. He was out of Kilkenny, So.
Right.
But he was the closest. There was two girls between myself and Brian, so I would have had contact with him, all right, because he was the closest boy, I suppose. I'm the youngest, and so I knew him. Like, I mean, I had a rapport going on with him since I was young, since I was a chap. But so when I left school, I went to Dublin, and he was finishing off in UCD, and he had been working in P&T, and he did an arts degree in UCD, and he was finishing off when I was doing my first year, and we just started playing guitar together, writing songs.
Yeah, so if I'm picking you up right, I mean, formal education and stuff like that was something you got through and got over, as it were.
Yeah, I got enough to get arts.
Yeah,
that's all I really had a clear idea to do. I remember we went to school. I remember in 4th year, 5th year, the careers officer, or he wasn't a careers officer, he was one of our teachers, and he said to us that, right lads, there's the guards are full, the civil service is full, this is full, that is full. You've either got to go to college and get a million A's, and or else that's it. There was really no opportunities, and he was kind of telling us that there was no opportunities.
Was he being realistic, or do you think he was?
He was kind of being realistic. Yeah.
I mean, this would have been mid-80s. I know it sounds like a rant on my part.
87, 88. Yeah. I mean, so people were leaving. I
was going to say, this is the Ryanair generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my oldest brother, he's 12 years older than me. He left. He was gone since 83. He came back in 88. He was in America, and it seemed like everybody had somebody in the family who was gone. And prospects were kind of grim, and that was the backdrop for my secondary school.
You didn't you went definitely for an arts degree, but you didn't have, like the way some people would decide at 3rd year transition year, I'm going to do X number of subjects because I want to do You know, you didn't have a very definite...
No, not very definite.
Yeah.
No, I was fairly focused on. It was just I thought it'd be something I'd be good at, because I was good at writing, and I liked history as well. So I picked history and English and linguistics as a third subject, and I was really just doing it because I knew I had the ability to do it, I suppose, you know. But then I realised after a few months that I couldn't bear any more of academia. I couldn't physically do it anymore.
Was it the mechanics? I know some people would say that, you know, when you start to break down a poem or break down a book, it starts to lose its appeal. Was it the fact that you weren't picking or listening to or reading poetry or pieces, you were analysing them and dissecting them? Was that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I would have understood at that age how deep a poem or whatever was. The only art that had any resonance with me was music and pop songs. That's the only art that I ever paid any attention to. You know?
Yeah, you're what I'm picking up from you is the academic side of the arts wasn't really that wasn't, you know, doing it for you, to use that expression.
Not really. No,
yeah.
It was. I didn't respond well to UCD either, and I didn't regret leaving it. And I made that decision, and my parents in this case were very supportive. They'd been helping me a bit with accommodation, and they said, well, yeah, if that's what you want to do, like, do it. And what I wanted to do was to start a band and try to make records and try to be a success at it, you know. Which is what we did, and we when we started the band, it was full time, you know. We were signing on the Dole, and it was the Rock and Dole.
The Rock and Dole days, yeah. Yeah,
it was, but it was very very focused, you know, and we wrote about. I mean, we had a different song every week. We had a new set every week. It was very concentrated.
So it wasn't just what'll I do while I think about what to do kind of existence. It was very definite.
Yeah, it was like we were playing gigs every week in Dublin. I mean, within a few weeks we had a demo. We played a gig in Kilkenny actually in Henderson's, and we raised money for a demo, which we made, and that demo got us a fanning session, which went down really well. Yeah, did 5 tracks, and then that brought us to
another stage.
Yeah, to another stage. Yeah.
Well, maybe it's something we can come back and talk about after your first piece of music. And I'm very conscious that you're coming, as you say, music is your primary kind of. It's what does it for you. And I know it's extremely difficult for most people to pick 4 pieces of music. Your first piece is by a band called Can.
It's from 1972. They're a band that I had heard of, like yourself, but I hadn't actually heard until I was 21. I was in a studio, and it was late at night, and somebody put them on very loud, and it was 20 minutes before I could figure out who it was, and it was, you know, it just really blew me away, and hearing them just really opened things up for me in terms of performance and ways of appreciating music and how long it can go on for, and a lot of their stuff is very structured, and it does sound like improvised music and improvisations, but it is actually stitched together and edited together.
Has a shape, a definite shape. Yeah.
There's a guy, the bass player basically stitches all these jams together, you know. Well, that's the way they operated for a while. Well, it's one piece, but then edited, right. It's taken out, and maybe the end stuck on the beginning, you know. Right. They were a German band from Cologne, started in the late 60s, and they had two different lead singers. The guy singing on this is Damo Suzuki, he's a Japanese guy, and they're still going now. I mean, in different guises, you know.
Okay, we'll have a listen to that. Spoon is the name of the track. The band is called Can, and we'll talk to you after the outbreak. Welcome back to People in Profile on KCLR 96 FM. Just before the break, you had the first choice of our guest tonight, Canice Kenealy, and it was a German band called Can, and the song was called Spoon. And just before we played that piece, Canice, we were talking about the start of the band that became Engine Alley. So you were saying that you were doing a couple of gigs in UCD and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I had the busking thing going on with Eamon, and myself and Brian started. We played a few cover versions, and one of our original songs we called ourselves the Marksy Hallers. If you remember, Marksy Haller was a character in
All right,
Pritzi's
Jack.
Honour.
Yeah, Pritzi's Honour. Yeah, no, just
Marksy
a
Haller's
point.
so smart, you know.
Why is he so dead? Yeah,
That's it.
yeah, that
You
was
know, stupid name, but there you go.
yeah.
And then we, like I said, we went to London and bought guitars, and we went to London and worked and bought guitars, and as you did in the late 80s. And when we came back, Eamon was already on board at this stage. He wasn't in UCD, but I always had him in mind as the bass player, so he kind of auditioned for Brian. And Brian thought, yeah, he's cool. But Brian knew him anyway. I mean, this was all building up, really. When I look back at it, it was building up over.
Yeah, it sounds like it
the
actually
ages
described
we
it.
were 12 and 13. Like, I mean, Brian knew that myself and Eamon were playing music together, and we would always kind of joke and mention, oh yeah, we're going to have a band, and it happened really naturally, like, you know. And it I think Brian saw me kind of jumping around one night when we were in somebody's flat and we were listening to music, and he kind of just said, right, I think you'll be good for this little idea I've got, you know. And I thought, yeah, well, you're not so bad yourself, and I said to him, well, I've got this friend, and that was it, you know.
Yeah, and there's two guitars and a bass player.
Yeah. So we auditioned a few drummers, and then we eventually found a drummer, Emmeline Duffy Fallon. We got her through an ad in a music shop, and which was kind of unusual. She was younger than us as well, and she was female, which, you know.
There are very few female drummers.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
At the best of times, yeah.
People used to say that to us all the time. It's very unusual to get a female drummer. But but she was good, you know. And we joined. Yeah, so we were a 4-piece then, and that's when we did the demos and we did the fanning session, and we got one of our. The guy who noticed the fanning session was a guy called Pete Holliday. He became our manager. He used to be in the Radiators. And he was our producer actually first. He produced our demos. He brought us into the studio and showed us. He basically explained how a studio works and really helped us, and with songwriting and everything. He really encouraged us, and that led to us getting a deal with Mother Records, which is U2's company, and they were, you know, signing bands. And he became our manager. Then we got him to be our manager because we wanted somebody we could trust, I suppose, to be our manager. And so we got some money injected into us, and we were able to sustain a fairly consistent life of touring Ireland and writing songs and recording records. And so it was great to get that opportunity to get, because we were not that we were ever going to give up, but we were living from week to week, really, you know. It was fairly. The first, you know, I went out and bought a pair of shoes when we got that deal, you know.
Right.
Remember that?
So you didn't go out.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you didn't go out and buy the Ferrari or the yacht.
No, I didn't.
Much more basic requirements.
No, yeah. And
this would have been
great. It was great encouragement, you know.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that U2 were kind of every band in the 80s, it seemed, from the mid 80s on, was the next U2, and it sounds horrible to say, but they were very supportive in their way as well. I mean, the Mother Records provided a means by which bands like yourselves were given money to get started. But it was in advance. I mean, this is the point that I was going to make. I mean, it's all very, you know, you can look back on it now, but I mean, you were being given money in advance of selling albums.
It wasn't a huge amount. It was,
but
what was it, 35,000, but we only got half. Remember, we got 17 and a half. That just went into the kitty, which was to pay for everything. Like, we rented a rehearsal room over where we used to live, and, you know, all these different, you know, when you look back at it, it's not really that much, like. But it was, we used to make money, good money from gigs as well, but we never kept that money for ourselves. You know, we didn't pay ourselves enough, really, when I look back at it, you know.
Yeah.
It so that developed. You know, we were on television a lot, and we had an album out in 1992. It's called A Sonic Holiday, and we went to England. Then we lived in England in 1993. We went over to live there to try to kind of make it in England.
That wouldn't have been unusual. The days of staying at home were a long time away.
Yeah. I suppose so. Maybe it was part of that attitude. Yeah. I mean,
was that a conscious game plan? I suppose is what I'm asking.
Well, the plan was, to be honest with you, what happened was we were getting the impression from Mother Records that they weren't going to release our records internationally, which was the whole basis of the deal, was that they were going to do that. And the whole being licensed out to another label or getting an international release seemed to be delayed all the time, you know. So it really felt like we had to just go over there and start playing the gigs in order to get the record out. And it's one of those classic rock and roll cliches, like the guy who took over Mother Records International, the guy who, you know, was picked to sell Mother Records bands outside of Ireland, he just didn't like us, you know.
Right. And was as simple as that, he didn't plug you.
Kind of, yeah. And it was an uphill struggle, you know, trying to get those records released in 1983 in England, and we did. But you know, it did knock the stuffing out of us a bit, you know, to be so successful in Ireland and then to have to find it so hard trying to make it. Like, I don't think we were the kind of band that were going to keep on going relentlessly. I mean, I'll give you an example, right? The Frames, right, are a band that would be around the same amount of time as us, maybe a bit after us. And, you know, they're still around now. They're still going for it and doing it, and he's staying doing that. But we really needed to have more than just success at home, you know.
Yeah.
You know, appreciative of it as we are. We did need.
Well, you had a different ambition, if we can call it that.
Yeah. And I think I don't know. I mean, you know, it's just different ways. It just so many parallel universes going around. Like, I mean, I don't know if we would have been around much longer, even if we had a big, massive worldwide hit, or if we had been more successful. You know, I mean, then you just get back to the stage of thinking, well, what's the meaning of success? You know, how successful is successful? Like, you know? So I tend to think now that I do tend to focus on how the great things, all the great concerts that we played, the great concerts that we've recorded, all the different songs that we've recorded, and you know, for everything we released, there's 2 songs that we didn't release that are in the vaults, you know. Right. So I'm just really proud of the whole experience.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to you know, it is kind of the elephant in the corner when, you know, anybody attached to Engine Alley.
You say I look like an elephant?
It's something that people have a perception of, you know, and as I say, the 80s was, you know, there were record company executives flying into Dublin. The story went every second weekend with bags of money ready to sign bands and all that sort of thing. But statistically, there was only a handful of bands that could have come out of that and stayed the distance. Ironically, U2 being the main example. But there are other bands who have kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. But you know, your perspective on it seems, well, I suppose healthy. But you know, the perception that people would have was great album, big fish, small pond, sold plenty of records in Ireland, went off and then just got lost. That, you know, and that's the fickle nature of
Or even when we came back, you know, we used to have a kind of flamboyant image, and even when we changed that, people go, oh, why didn't you know, what's happened to the lipstick, or what's happened to the, you know, the flamboyance? And when you were being flamboyant, people would be giving you a hard time, you know.
That you're not, I mean, there's no depth in your songs, or
I don't know. People. I mean, you can get caught up in people's perceptions, really. You know, people have a lot of preconceptions about you. You know, if you've been in a band, they seem to have anyway. I don't know. You know, it's hard to tell.
We'll come back to that. No, it's a point I want to raise with you, because you know, in the latest incarnation of fame, the Eurostar, the Pop TV, the X Factors, the whatever, it's all in quickly and out quickly. But you know, we'll come back and talk about that maybe after your next piece of music, which is again, I know all these bands, I just wouldn't know if I was listening to them. The Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
To be honest with you, Martin, I don't know much about them, except I have the album and I know they're American, but I couldn't tell you which city they're from. Right. They're fronted by a woman called Karen O. And there's a bass, or not a guitar player and a drummer. There's no bass as far as I know, but they make a hell of a racket without a bass player. The song I'm going to play now is called Maps, and it's off their first album, and it just blew me away when I heard it, you know. So it's just a good contemporary band, you know. Okay, we'll have a listen to the AES, and we'll come back after. Welcome back to People in Profile on KCLR 96 FM. Before the break, you heard the second choice of our guest tonight, Canice Kenealy, and it was a band called the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, an American band. We weren't sure about where they came from exactly, but that's not important. And the band were playing a track called Maps from their debut LP. And following on from where we were at, time kind of caught up with us, but I want to pick up from where we left off. The band had ceased to function
at a certain point. But at the time we left it, there was, you were playing up and down, you were doing the English circuit, you were not getting the sort of support you expected. Was that kind of the beginning of the end, or was there any one thing where you just said, look, this is not working anymore, and I need, or we need, or...
Yeah, I suppose there was a point where I kind of said, right, that's enough now, enough's enough, kind of. It wasn't really it wasn't good for my mind anymore, it was a bit unhealthy, there was stress involved. But we did, we just kept going. We did record a lot of stuff, which I'm glad, and we recorded our second album ourselves. We financed that ourselves and recorded it, and Eamon, was the engineer, and we really happy with that. The second album, and it's quite different to the first album as well. It's less poppy, I suppose, and more it's kind of darker, and but as a collection of songs, it really stands up. That was called Shot in the Light, the second album. And then there was a couple more albums that never came out that we went in and did. There was a lot of songs left over, stuff that had never really made it to B-sides and earlier songs. And that was supposed to be our third album, sort of long player. We did that in 96, and after we recorded that, it never actually saw the light of day, but things had kind of run its course then, we just, it seemed to be the right time to, people had other things, there was other
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, was it the almost the cliche that, musically you'd kind of brought it to where you could, and it was time to be looking around?
Yeah, it was kind of wrapping up loose ends, really, that third album, and we went our separate ways, and I immediately actually went into just doing stuff on my own on a 4-track, and I just messed around with that throughout the late 90s. I kind of walked away from it, really. I got a job in a bookshop in Hodges Figgis in Dublin, and I really just, I had a regular life.
But it's something
that I cherish.
Yeah, well, this is what was a point that we hit on earlier. Maybe we should talk about it a bit. Was that the perception, as you say, when the band was going and you were wearing the makeup, they said, "Oh, you're not to be taken seriously." But then when you took off the makeup,
who said that?
You know what I mean? Did you find that people had a strange impression about why the band broke up? And
I don't know, really. I mean, at a certain point, not that many people would have really noticed either. Do you know what I mean? We never went out and did a big farewell tour or anything, or because we wouldn't have thought that anybody really would have minded that much that we'd gone away, But it is great when we get back together. It's kind of confusing for people maybe, because when we do get back together, it's kind of because we're in the same town, because we don't all live in the same city now. So the reason we get back together is because we're family, It's my brother and my best friend.
And your best friend, as you said. Yeah.
And I've forgotten to mention Kenneth Rice. Actually, he was a member of the band. He was a violin player. He played keyboards as well. And there was another member, Paul O'Byrne. He's been our drummer. He's kind of been our drummer since we broke up.
That sounds like a contradiction in terms.
Yeah,
but I know.
It's weird, but he's It's like we got our. But he's a great friend as well.
Yeah. And since then, as you say, the band itself ran its course, but it didn't kind of implode or explode in recriminations. I mean, it just ran a course. Yeah. And the fact that you're still getting together is an indication that it wasn't that
actually we don't
bad. A finish.
No, it's great. The reason when we got back together, it was funny because the reason we were getting back together was to have fun and play gigs. And it had been so long since we had played gigs to have fun. I mean, I don't know, maybe we never had played gigs to have fun, because when we started, we were playing gigs to, make it big or whatever, make records. So it was interesting to play gigs for fun. And I remember saying to somebody in a pub, when we were, we're playing next week, it was around Christmas, and I said, it'll be, I know, it's really good, it's good fun these days, and he was saying, like, as opposed to what, as opposed to not fun,
Yeah. And
I thought, it really kind of struck me, I really had to think about that and think, yeah, why was it not fun,
Yeah, but
why would you do it if it's not fun?
Yeah,
well, that's to see. There's a real thin line between
that's what I was
business, trying to make it your career, and
you took all the same
time,
you took it all very seriously. I mean, this was not just a flipping, let's see what happens. I mean, as you said earlier, and it comes across, things happened for a reason. You planned them, you wanted to do them.
It was everything. It was our lives. I mean, we were really.
I suppose the obvious question is when the band effectively just stopped as an entity, you were doing your own stuff. I mean, how different was that? Just a matter of interest.
It was definitely more experimental. It was more. I would do layers of guitars, and I did a lot of spoken word as well, which I had hinted at in parts of Enginelli's songs.
Right.
And I did. It was definitely more experimental. It's the only way I can describe it, really.
Would you have been listening to a lot of bands? I mean, this is kind of the cliche that you're out on the road so much, you don't have enough time to listen to other music. You don't have enough time, in some cases, to write new stuff, and it all kind of.
Well, I tell you, one of the things before I actually went to the bookshop, I was in a record shop, a second-hand record shop for a year and a bit, called Smile Records, and I was really introduced to loads of different music then. And the guy who worked there would have all these collections of tapes, and the guy who ran the shop, he had all these tapes of all these. He'd have one tape of girl groups, he'd have another tape of Mississippi John Hurt, then he'd have another tape of krautrock.
The infamous mixtape. Yeah,
or even just one tape, like one C90 of Philip Glass and another C90 of, late 70s punk, and it was just, and I just devoured all this stuff, I mean, I was always a wide listener anyway, but this really just, it was like a nuclear bomb in terms of getting turned on to loads of different types of music. I was listening to doo-wop and reggae, and I just suddenly got turned on to everything, and I realised how much music, how many musics were good, and they were cool, and they were far out.
Yeah. As you say, there was a logical end. There was a move on then. I mean, did you have a definite game plan for yourself, if I can put it like that? Yeah, as in, were you going to take yourself as the next project? And
yeah, not really. No, I was very deliberately not going to try to be commercially successful. Really, I did put out an album of my own stuff under the name Clay Machine eventually in 2002. But I really was just making bedroom music, making it for myself. I was making art for its own sake, really. And I was, not that I wasn't playing live. I wasn't determined enough, to bring it to the outside world. But I really thought it was good as well, which is why I made a record of it. Right. But it was a strange thing. It was like people would ask you, "What are you doing now?" and I'd say, "Well, I'm making music, but really I'm actually just living, I'm working and I'm paying tax and I'm a real person now,
No, that's, but, again, it's something that there's the infamous kind of musical differences cliche, then there's the difficult second album, or then there's the solo effort from a member of the band or whatever. And there are different reasons. I was just curious about your own.
Not really, it doesn't really follow that line, really, I suppose from the outside people see that,
Well, that's again back to perceptions we were talking about,
So, but for me it's kind of, I suppose, I've always been creative, and what happened was, I was always doing creative things, like those tape recordings I mentioned when I was 10 or 11, and messing around and doing little performances. I mean, I was always doing that. It's just that the rest of the world seemed to know more about the era when I was in Enginelli,
Right. And is it kind of, again, that cliche, they'll say, "Oh, you were great when you were in Enginelli, but where did it all go wrong?" sort of thing. Is that what you mean?
No, I don't get that too much. No, I know, it's just that I don't know. It's just I'd always just see it as one long piece. The whole bit. The whole
just another step along the way.
Creative, and it's just I would constantly be creative. And it's just that after Enginelli, it was just, I wasn't doing it in public anymore. Right. And now I've started to do it in public again, which is nice. And I've got my own band now. It's called Rigmarole. Okay,
we'll talk about that now in a minute. Just time is creeping up, and again, always try and get the music in from start to finish if that's possible. Next band, they're called Boards of Canada, but are they Canadian?
No, they're not. They're from Scotland.
Right.
They're just two guys. It's electronica, I suppose, is the bracket it comes under, and this track is from their first album, which is it's called Music Has the Right to Children, and this track is called
a strange one, Roy Gabeev.
It's actually the name of the person who you remember when you're trying to remember the rainbow. It's Richard of York.
Batman. Oh, right. Okay, yeah. I see it now. Now you've mentioned it. I should have just said nothing and pretended I knew. Yeah.
It took me a while to figure that out, actually.
Okay. We'll have a listen to the Boards of Canada, and we'll talk to you after the ad break. Welcome back to People in Profile on KCLR 96 FM. We're coming into the last part of the show, and we're here with Canice Kenealy. The previous piece of music was a band called the Boards of Canada, and we figured out that it was stands for Richard of York, Give Us Battle in Vain, so it's whatever that spells. And just before the piece of music, we were talking about, you know, you're moving on, that you were continuing to do, you know, music and as you say, spoken word, and you know, there were other things going on, and you've come to another stage, and you mentioned a band, Rigmarole.
Yeah.
Now, is that kind of a
Again, it's a very natural thing that developed between a friend of mine, Colin Ryan. He was on drums, and I just picked up the bass because it sounded good with his drums, and we just played together instrumentally for a while, and then we've kind of found the right person as a guitarist, Carl Conroy. He's younger than us. We used to know his brother, but he's great, and it's a band that's a lot of it is improvised when we play live, and but we do have certain pieces as well, and we stretch things out. But we have about 25 or 30 songs now, and even to call them songs isn't really. It's hard to describe. They're like just explosions of sound, really, and I'd have certain catchphrases, and
well, they wouldn't follow. I mean, you used the phrase pop songs. When you were in Engine Alley, you were a pop, you're a pop band. Now that has a number of different meanings, but you mentioned it yourself. It's a tag, the electronica tag at the last band. I mean, you're finding it hard to explain what it is, but is that because there isn't a tag that it falls in underneathly, or because you're not into?
No, they are songs. I do sing. I sing on every track, and it's just a lot more stream of consciousness than anything I've done previously. I'm making up stuff as I'm going along. I'm taking notes from all these sheets that I have of words, and it fits into a category more of improvised music and jazz. I always think of it as punk jazz,
right?
Because it's what happens when these guys play together, and it's there's no real commercial ambitions, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's much more of a live thing than anything else, There's no real. I think there's almost too much recorded music around these days,
Yeah. Would you say that? Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it'd be more interesting to do for people to experience something live, because it's more of a unique experience now live. I think there's too many records out there. There's not enough time to listen to all these.
Do you find that? I thought it was just me.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And I think I'm just more interested now in making a thing out of performance, because that's just a once-off experience, as performance, and being able to sing and do a piece, and to be in the same room as an audience member, I think would be the most special thing you can get these days.
Right. Have you anything else in line with that? I know you were doing some DJ work at one stage, but that. That was just something else that you did. It wasn't a conscious move in that direction.
Not really. Well, no, I wouldn't be. It was work, really. I was playing other people's songs, mixing them together, but only because I'd have fairly encyclopedic knowledge of music, So I thought I'd use my record collection. I'm not doing a lot of that at the moment, but I'm available. And but it's.
Oh, where to next?
I'm not gonna. Yeah. It's funny because people would be talking about taking up golf or taking up bridge, and I would like to take up bridge someday, but at the moment I'm still so engrossed in music and the band now that I can't think of. I don't have the time to do anything else. What spare time I have is just I'm glad to be doing music.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's
good exercise as well.
Yeah, well, throwing yourself around the stage once again.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's energetic, all right. Yeah, intense.
Okay, time as always is caught up with us as I knew it would, particularly with when we get into stuff that I know I'm personally involved in. The last piece of music, the kind of your favourite band of all time is the Clash.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think I've realised recently that they are, because they were my favourite band in 1981, so I think they still are, really.
Right.
I was kind of lucky with them. I just got exposed to like 4 of their albums at once, and there was something about them. They were really quite experimental, and they just were so ready to embrace so many different styles, like rap and gospel and everything. They really they just went for it. Like they really went for it. They went for exploring reggae, and they weren't afraid to try to be something else, and they ended up sounding like themselves. They ended up breaking new ground, and the track that we're going to play actually is it's from Sandinista, which I think is their best album. It's a very underrated album, and it's got that kind of carnival vibe off it. It's again, it's just an example of this different avenues that they went off into.
Yeah, there's as you've described it to me, there's kind of a carnival sound. It's the actual sounds of a carnival, the song, and it's kind of mixed over it.
Yeah, and it's just it's just a great example of the whole mishmash that they used to do. I think they were really ahead of their time, by years.
Well, I was going to say that's early 80s.
Yeah, that was 1980.
So it's before the samples and mixes that are kind of part and parcel.
They were just mixing in different styles. Yeah. Not even the special effects, but just even the style that the drummer. It was kind of down to their drummer, really. He was a brilliant drummer.
Right. We'll have a listen to that. As I say, I want to play as much as possible. Thanks for coming in, Canice.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure chatting with you. Stay tuned to KCLR 96 FM. After the news, you'll hear Chris Ward taking you through until 11 with the Hit Squad. And we'll talk to you again very soon. So until we meet again, we leave you with The Clash.